Hello, everyone, and thank you for being patient while I shared. I think I'm getting a little faster at that, but thank you for being patient. And Jim Bird says, hey, Steve Gonzo says, breaking news Trump has approved the Tide Pod Challenge as a Trump cure for Trump virus. Donald Trump floated more medical trial balloons on Thursday night, repeatedly suggesting disinfectant be injected into the bodies of humans to cure coronavirus patients. Kay says, hi, all. Hope you're safe and well tonight. So far, so good here. Happy to hear it, Kay. Happy to hear it. So far, so good here, too. Thank you. Susan waves to us. Thank you, Susan. Kay says, I've heard that Steve. Heard that, Steve. Please do not shoot up alcohol, folks. Susan, Stephanie Smith Udy, and Jim Bird have joined. And Dolores has joined. Hey, Dolores, how are you? And thanks for the meme, by the way. And Kay says, hi, Dolores. Bonnie's joined. Hi, honey. Stephanie says, hey, everyone. I am starting a share army to help get Dr. Joe's live streams to more people. If you're interested, let me know. I'm going to start a share army chat thread in Messenger. Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie says, hey, my loves. And Dolores says, sharing now. Thank you, Dolores. Okay, so the title tonight is descriptive. Hey, Stacy, how are you doing? Okay, I want to start talking about a very popular topic right now, which is reopening the economy. When are we going to reopen the economy so people can earn money? Dolores is starting a watch party. Fine, Dolores. Excellent. And there's the latest outrages, of which there are many, some including the idea that we should open up the economy again. And then I want to end with some thoughts on Joe Biden and what we ought to do about him and what we are doing about him. I'm fine, Stacy. Thank you. So I'm going to start sharing some things with you now. The first thing to share is a piece from the MIT Technology Review. And the piece is about what we need to do to reopen. The headline says the U.S. needs to do 20 million tests a day to reopen safely, according to a new plan. 20 million tests a day, folks. Not a week, not a month, but a day. If we were to do 20 million tests per day, then it would take us between 16 and 17 days to complete a round of testing. And then we'd start again, basically, and keep testing and keep testing and keep testing and keep on tracking. Okay, keep on tracking and contact tracing. And then we'd find out who has actual immunity to the disease, who has produced it and who has not, and pretty soon we'd find out how long immunity lasts and who is safe to go back to work and who is not. Anyway, the technology review article says to open up the economy safely this summer, it's contingent on doing at least 20 million tests every day, scaling up contact tracing, and ensuring that those who need to isolate can be properly supported. The report was produced by 45 cross-disciplinary experts assembled by Harvard University's Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics. And they say we need to be doing 5 million tests a day by early June in order to start to reopen the country, increasing to 20 million by midsummer to fully end the shutdown. From the start, the World Health Organization has said the only way to beat the virus is test, test, test. That message seems to be finally getting through. How we get there, the level of testing needed depends on our being able to effectively trace the contacts of those infected with coronavirus, warn those people have been exposed, test them, and isolate everyone who tests positive, the report says. We need to provide job protection and support for those who have to isolate, including deliveries of food and care packages. That involves hiring an army of contact tracers, at least another 100,000 people. It might be more than that. It would be great if we could do it in conjunction with passing a federal job guarantee that would provide jobs for at least 100,000 of the federal job guaranteers. It also requires us to massively scale up testing by incentivizing the private sector to create new solutions at speed, the authors say. This could be coordinated by a pandemic testing board set up by the federal government, given the task of securing the needed testing supplies and infrastructure. This program would be expensive, 50 to 300 billion over 2 years. However, the report, the authors say, is dwarfed by the economic cost of continued collective quarantine, which is 100 to 350 billion every month. Every month. So 50 to 300 billion over 10 years. Over 2 years, okay, is nothing compared to 100 to 350 billion every month. And by the way, it would be more like 350 billion every month. And I think that's an underestimate, really. It's really, an underestimate. At one point, Bill Mitchell, the Australian economist, right after the crash of 2008, was estimating that crash was costing the economy in the United States $9 trillion every week. $9 trillion every week, if I recall correctly. Couldn't have been $9 trillion every week. I'm sorry. I have to look that up again. Couldn't have been $9 trillion every week. That's far too much. I think it was actually $9 trillion per year. But it was certainly that $9 trillion figure was in there. I promise I'll check back on that for you. There are huge losses caused by the kinds of high levels of unemployment that we have now, and we'll get to those high levels in just a little while. Anyway, the benefits of this approach, implementing a lockdown, does not beat the virus effectively. It just hits pause on its spread until we're able to come up with a way to treat it or reduce the number of cases to the point where they're traceable. This plan would avoid the need for endless cycles of opening up, then shutting down the economy until we find a vaccine. The plan is contingent on support. Regardless of its merits, this plan will only succeed with backing from businesses and politicians. But landing an endorsement from a household name, politician, or a big company, perhaps one of the tech or retail giants, would help push it closer to reality. Crucially, it cannot become a reality unless it receives enough funding and fast. Perhaps the awful human toll will help to focus minds. The U.S. has 759,786 confirmed COVID 19 cases as of this morning, and 40,683 people have died. Since this article was written, of course, we've added another 7,000 fatalities, and we're already up to 900,000 confirmed COVID 19 cases. So, those are the facts. This is the way to beat the virus. The cost of 100 to 300 billion every month, or 350 billion every month, is I'm sorry, 50 to 300 billion over 2 years is a comparatively low cost, and is far less than we've already spent on the effects of the coronavirus on the economy. So it's very cheap, okay, at the price. We've already gone into deficits that are estimated to be up to $4 trillion annually this year. Okay, this year, $4 trillion in deficit spending, basically on the virus. Okay, so I mean, there we are. 50 to 300 billion over 2 years is actually pocket change, and can easily be passed in the next coronavirus relief bill that Congress gets around to, if it ever gets around to another one, which probably depends on the chances of Mitch McConnell getting spanked in the fall. Okay, next article. This one is from Common Dreams, and it's about one of our absolutely favorite politicians, specifically Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, otherwise known as AOC. And oh, here it is. I'm sorry. I pushed it up to the top already. That's what the problem is. Okay, so Common Dreams article says, well, it calls for a contribution to Common Dreams at this point. They're in a fundraising drive. It says, please help. The article is written by John Kelly, a staff writer there. It was written today, and it says, it is a joke. AOC uses 30-second floor speech to rip the Republicans over inadequate COVID-19 relief efforts. And there's a picture of AOC there. There's probably a video somewhere here. Yeah, there's a video of her 30-second speech. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had only 30 seconds on Thursday afternoon to share her frustration with her opponents on the Republican side of the aisle as the U.S. House of Representatives debated the next phase of the federal legislation aimed at providing economic relief for the crisis spurred by the coronavirus outbreak. While the package passed Tuesday by the Senate is expected to also receive approval in the House, but later in the day, that's today. And by the way, it did receive approval in the House. I don't know what the vote is, haven't had time to look it up yet. The Democrat from New York is among those progressives who have expressed deep criticism of the bill. Sorry, my camera's gone south for a moment. See if I can easily get it back. Yes. Came back easily. aimed at providing economic relief for the crisis. Sorry, it's out again, so I got to go back again. And there it is again. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's the rain outside. While the package passed Tuesday by the Senate is expected to also receive approval in the House later today, I'm sorry, friends. We will get a steady feed at some time tonight. Don't know where, don't know when. Okay, here we are again. Hopefully, this will be a little more steady as we go forward. Well, the package passed. Okay, I said that already. Anyway, it has passed. It has passed. I'm just going to go on for a while in this way. You won't see my face. You'll just see the article. Because I don't want to keep doing this, so I'm just going to go through the article. You'll hear my voice. Anyway, she's among the progressives who has expressed deep criticism of the bill. In her brief remarks on Thursday, she had only 30 seconds. They tried to muzzle her as much as they could. Ocasio-Cortez said it was laughable for GOP lawmakers to claim they're doing anything other than serving the wealthy and corporate interests of large companies as they continue to fight against any meaningful economic proposals that would center the needs of working class families, low income people, small business owners, and others suffering most from the pandemic. It is a joke when Republicans say they have urgency around this bill. She said the only folks they have urgency around are Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and Shake Shack. Those are the people getting assistance in this bill. You are not trying to fix this bill for mom and pops. I think she probably said moms and pops, but that's all right. While referencing large restaurant chains that will benefit disproportionately from the new relief package that includes over $300 billion in additional funding for a flawed small business, quote-unquote, loan program, Ocasio-Cortez said the legislation does little to help those struggling to make ends meet. She said if you had urgency, you would legislate like rent was due on May 1st and make sure that we include rent and mortgage relief for our constituents, unquote. I'm sorry to say they failed to do that. They failed to recognize any urgency about the idea that rent was due on April 1st, and now they're just doing the same thing again. And Representative Pramila Jayapal, co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, also rose ahead of the vote to decry its inadequacies. She says, in days we will lose more American lives than during the Vietnam War, she tweeted. 26 million Americans are unemployed from COVID, body bags piling up, insufficient testing or PPE. Every minute is a death, a family devastated, a business shuttered. We must think and deliver bigger, she says. And of course, she's right on the money. Just ahead of the vote in the House, a broad coalition of the groups on the progressive side sent a letter to Democratic lawmakers urging them to vote against the legislation approved by the Senate known as COVID 3.5, as it fails key tests in terms of putting the needs of people, families, and Main Street businesses ahead of corporate interests and the greed cave industry. And Indivisible was one of those groups. And they said, quote, we call on all progressive House members to make clear now that you will oppose any bill in the next round that does not put the majority of focus on the people's agenda that Americans desperately need and expect from our elected leaders, the letter stated. To achieve this, we believe it's critical that the House go first and pass a Democratic bill early in the next round to set the terms of debate, to maximize the leverage and honor all the voters who turned out in 2018 to elect the Democratic House. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me see if I can turn that. Okay, I will share once more. Thank you all for coming. I see we're at 23 people now. Thank you for coming. It was. There's a lag. And the next article is from Common Dreams, also Jake Johnson. It was written today, and it says, lowest of the low, McConnell and Trump ripped for blocking food assistance in the COVID-19 package. Oh, yes. Hit on the poor. Punch down. Punch down. Mitch McConnell and Trump are all about punching down. They blocked the proposed increase in funding for federal nutrition assistance at a time when millions of people across the U.S. are relying on food banks to survive the economic fallout of the coronavirus pandemic. And Mitch and Trump ought to be ashamed. Representative James McGovern, Democrat of Massachusetts, said in a statement Wednesday after the Senate passed the $480 billion interim coronavirus relief bill that did not include the modest increase in Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program SNAP funding that the Democrats requested. The interim package is expected to pass the House on Thursday. So why did the Democrats vote for the plan then? Why did they vote for the plan? Why did we elect them by a heavy majority to run the House? They did not vote against this plan. And McConnell and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin informed Republican senators on a conference call Sunday that the additional SNAP funding would not be included in the final bill. Why didn't the Democrats just amend the bill on the floor? Why didn't they amend that bill and add the SNAP funding? And while they were at it, why didn't they add the Jayapal Tlaib bill to the bill? And why didn't they add a Medicare for All provision to the bill? Why not? Why didn't they do that? They run the House. They have the House. What the hell is wrong with Nancy Pelosi? On Wednesday, the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced that SNAP enrollment has jumped by 40% since last month as millions report being out of work. As Common Dreams said on Thursday, more than 26 million people have filed jobless claims since the middle of March, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And McGovern went on talking in that vein. When they were negotiating over this bill, the interim bill, congressional Democrats pushed for a 15% increase in the maximum benefit that SNAP pays, which would have amounted to an additional $25 monthly per person or $100 monthly for a family of four. Overall, the increase likely would have cost around $5 billion for the rest of 2020, a small fraction, 1/100th of the $500 billion in funding for small businesses, hospitals, and COVID-19 testing that the Senate approved on Tuesday. And Pramila Jayapal called this cruel. Of course, it's cruel. And she tweeted about what was needed in SNAP increases. In a retweet of the McGovern tweet, Trump announced earlier this month that it would delay implementation of work requirements for the recipients of SNAP, a decision that came only after the rule change was blocked by a federal judge. The rule would have kicked more than 1 million people off federal nutrition assistance. Trump punching down. Trump punching down. I think the Democrats ought to run on a meme. Trump only punches down. He only punches down on the poor. He punches down on the immigrants. He punches down on working people. He punches down on the middle class. Punching down lends itself to memes all across the country. Memes. The CARES Act, which Trump signed into law on March 27th, including $15.8 billion in funding for SNAP, but as Dottie Rosenbaum of the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities wrote in a blog post last month, quote, rather than expand eligibility or increase benefits, that appropriation is a technical fix to ensure that the government can pay for existing benefits, not an increase at all. So she expressed support for a 15% increase in the maximum SNAP benefit, as well as an expansion of eligibility to address the effects of COVID-19. So Democrats would not even fight for $5 billion extra dollars for people who are hungry and need that help. That's how useless they are. That's how useless they are. That's how useless our electing them to run the House was in 2018. Well, I suppose it wasn't entirely useless, since the Republican House would have been even worse. But anyway, going on, Common Dreams on April 23rd by Jessica Corbett, another staff writer of theirs, spotlighting a need for response at the scale of this catastrophe. U.S. unemployment claims hit 26.5. Those are the new unemployment claims over the last 5 weeks. This week isn't counted, even though it's Thursday already, and we've had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. That's not counted yet. So most of this week has gone by, so we know there are a few million more already built in here, but that's 26.5 million. Now, as I told you before, the 26.5 million of new jobless claims does not include any new claims. Sorry, I should be sharing my screen on this one. It does not include the 3.5% that were already unemployed. That was another 6 million. So the total number of unemployed people right now is most probably 32.5 million people. What percentage of the labor force is that? What percentage of the labor force is that? Well, I sort of computed that. Excuse me. You're probably getting this screen now, which must look very confusing to you. But I'll help with that in just a minute. It's unlikely that very many of the 6 million people have found any new jobs, so the number of people now employed isn't 26.5, it's 32.5. We ought to use the larger number for discussions, okay, of unemployment. Concerning the question of the unemployment rate, assuming 171 million in the labor force is truthful employment, 32.5 million unemployed is 19% of the labor force. So I believe the U3 unemployment rate right now is 19.3% of the labor force. It's that bad, and this Congress is sitting there doing little about it. Very, very little about it. Certainly not getting money to people they need. Certainly not getting the health care to them that they need. This is shameful. This is a scandal. And the Democrats who run the House are every bit as much to blame as the Republicans. And also, do not forget, that there is such a thing as a filibuster in the Senate. Little Chucky Schmucky Schumer could easily have run a filibuster. He could have run a filibuster which the Republicans could not have broken because the Democrats have enough senators to have maintained the filibuster and prevented the Republicans from breaking it. So little Chucky Schmucky could have run a filibuster and prevented this horrible bill from passing the Senate in the first place. So what good is he? He's no good. So Rania Khalek shared on Twitter one of her videos for In the Now Soapbox channel and declared that the one-time payment of $1,200 to adults who earn less than $75,000 a year authorized under the so-called CARES Act last month. Yeah, they should have entitled that the CARES for Big Business Act last month. Hasn't been sent to many Americans yet and isn't going to do a damn thing. She says, a one-time $1,200 check that many of us still haven't received isn't going to do a damn thing. She's absolutely right, is Rania Khalek, and there is a short video from Rania, who is one of our fire-eating progressives. And former Democratic political advisor Peter Dahl decried, yes, former Hillary Clinton political advisor Peter Dahl, decried a corrupt system that protects only the rich and provides no real relief to people who are under extreme duress, dying, and without food, health care, homes, or savings in the midst of a pandemic. And he called this a catastrophe. And I wish they wouldn't forget those other 6 million people. They're also people without savings. They're also people without health care. They're also people under extreme duress. They're also people who are homeless. There are also people who are dying. There are also people who are hungry and no real relief. A corrupt system that protects only the rich from Manu Raju. Even Manu Raju. He must be tired of working for, I think he works for MSNBC, but maybe he works for CNN. Sometimes I can't keep those people straight. The conditions evoke comparisons to both the 20th century's Great Depression and the more recent financial crisis that began in 2007, as Glassdoor senior economist Daniel Zhao said to Reuters, quote, today's report shows the labor market is almost certainly pushing into new territory, jolting the unemployment rate up above the Great Recession's 10% peak and wiping out more jobs than we gained in the recovery. That's an understatement. It's almost twice as high as the 10% peak of the 2008 Great Recession, so-called. Following the latest report on Thursday, Eric Levitz wrote for The Intelligencer, this is the worst labor market we've witnessed since the Great Depression. Should current trends continue, we may well exceed that era's peak unemployment rate of 24.9%. Yeah, at the rate we're going to exceed that by May 15th. It won't even be the end of June. It's going to be by May 15th. I mean, think about it. This week, we're probably going to have at least another 3 million, even if the rate continues to decline. That's going to bring it up to 35.6 million. That's going to be about 22% right there. The week after that, certainly by the week of May 15th, we're going to eclipse that 24.9% going away. For now, the social consequences of the present crisis are less dire and those of the early 1930s only because the American social safety net, however patchy and threadbare, is more robust today than it was then, thanks to Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson. And the $600 a week boost to federal unemployment benefits that Democrats pushed into the CARES Act over Republican opposition will spare millions of Americans from suffering catastrophic losses of income. And who was instrumental in getting that into the CARES Act? One Bernie Sanders. Bernie effing Sanders. But the fact that the welfare state has rendered the present recession less devastating than those of the pre-New Deal era does not weaken the case for further intervention. It strengthens that case. There is no reason for Americans to accept the present levels of unemployment and economic hardship as inevitable. Rather, this week's surge in jobless claims is in no small part a product of Congress's inadequate support for employers, states, and cities. And Levitt's detailed shortcomings of the Paycheck Protection Program that was implemented under the CARES Act. And he argued that Congress's most egregious failure has been its refusal to provide more than $150 billion in aid to states and cities. He's right about that. It was estimated that states and cities will need $2 trillion in relief from the federal government. $150 billion was a joke. The states and cities are responsible for all kinds of services to people. And revenues in states and cities are being cut in half. And Mitch McConnell was recommending the states and cities go bankrupt so people wouldn't have any pensions. In a series of tweets on Thursday and a blog post for the Economic Policy Institute, Heidi Shierholz, the think tank senior economist and director of policy, explained the 5 recent weeks of DOL figures shared, employment projections for the next year, and like Levitt's, pressured members of Congress to step up the federal response. EPI projects by the end of June net decline in employment could surpass 30 million. They are underestimating it. The progressive think tanks play the usual tricks of underestimating how bad things are because they're so afraid of a little conservative criticism that they overestimated this or that. While the conservatives overestimate things anytime they like to make their case. But the progressives, they always underestimate it. The Federal Reserve was projecting. The Federal Reserve was projecting that our net decline, in employment is going to be on the order of 46 or 47 million by the end of June. What is EPI doing projecting that it could surpass 30 million? What is that about? EPI has no teeth. I'm sick and tired of EPI. They didn't have any teeth there in 2009. They don't have any teeth now. They're constantly underestimating how bad things are going to get. Heidi Shierholz. The next relief and recovery package should provide $500 billion in aid to state and local governments. Too little. At least $1 trillion in aid to state and local governments. And then maybe wait and see how things look in 3 months. But talk now about the possibility of having to come up with another $1 trillion later. She also points out they have to extend unemployment insurance benefits. They have to provide some better protections for workers and jobs and include funding to safeguard our democracy. The funding to safeguard our democracy is going to be cheap. What's it going to be? $5 billion or $10 billion or something like that? That's going to cost hardly anything. We have to mention it. But the point is, in terms of the scale of money here, it's a footnote on things. And importantly, federal government relief should be tied to actual economic conditions and not solely the unemployment rate, so that these provisions do not expire too early when the economy and the people in it I still need them. Right. It has to be like the Tlai bill that provides for $1,000 a month per person going forward after the coronavirus crisis is over for a full year to get the economy started again. That's the kind of thing that is needed to supplement things directly targeted at the virus period. The CARES Act included an extension of unemployment coverage to many who fall through the gaps in our regular UI system called pandemic unemployment assistance. In almost all states, however, the PUA system is still being set up, so the vast majority of workers eligible for PUA but not regular unemployment insurance are not yet receiving benefits. What is being spoken of there is people in the gig economy. It's about people in the gig economy who aren't normally covered under unemployment insurance. Okay, so next one. This is an article by Owen Higgins, published April 23rd by Common Dreams. The headline is, "This is Unbelievable," citing the need for GOP input, but Pelosi yanks remote voting rule at the last minute. And progressive frustration with Democratic leadership continued to mount this week after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on Wednesday tabled a rules change that would have allowed members to use proxy voting to legislate during the coronavirus pandemic. She indicated that the House would take the matter up when it reconvenes on May 4th after Republicans, the minority party in the House, objected to the change. "This is unbelievable," tweeted Lindsey Boylan, a candidate for Congress in New York's 10th District, is running against incumbent Jerry Nadler in the Democratic primary. And she said, "Yes, why don't you announce a bipartisan commission to study the issue of remote voting instead of saving lives? This has got to be one of the most irresponsible and ridiculous things I've heard recently. Get your head out of your ass. This is unbelievable." Hooray for Lindsey Boylan. Get your head out of your ass is right. Jesus. The abrupt about phase came days after House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, as Common Dreams reported, expressed in a letter to the caucus Tuesday his vocal support for the rule change and for a more substantive change to allow remote voting. Beyond implementing the proxy voting as a first step, we ought to use this time as an opportunity to prepare for Congress to be able to work according to its full capabilities, even with social and physical distancing guidelines in place. Hoyer later on Tuesday told reporters he wanted a bipartisan solution. Screw that! A bipartisan solution isn't worth the job of a single American. But Pelosi pulled the change Wednesday morning, claiming the change needed bipartisan approval and citing an hour-long conversation with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy Tuesday on the proposal as changing her mind on proceeding with a vote. Is she nuts? Has she taken leave of her senses? She's convening a bipartisan panel to review it instead. This is awful. On Thursday, Pelosi told members on the floor that she hoped the chamber would decide to vote on a solution to the problem on May 4th if they return that early. I have a solution to the problem on May 4th if they return on May 4th. And I think they should return on May 4th. I think they need to do their jobs and get back to the House. And the first thing they need to do is to declare a point of order and use the point of order to relitigate who's going to be the Speaker of the House, because we need an end to Nancy Pelosi's rule right now. Right now. We did not elect the Democrats in 2018 so Nancy Pelosi could do things on a bipartisan basis, absolutely delaying the kind of legislation we need. And so, Congressman McGovern, chair of the House Rules Committee, said Thursday that while he respected the wishes of the Speaker, the clock is ticking. The status quo, in my opinion, is unacceptable and dangerous, he said. Well, what are you going to do about it, Jim? I mean, what are you going to do about it? If it's unacceptable and dangerous, what are you going to do about it? Declare a point of order and put the question to the whole House. Shall Nancy Pelosi continue as Speaker of the House? The creation of a bipartisan committee to look into the matter did not fill the week's Ryan Cooper with confidence, who said it was where legislation goes to die. Indeed. In a tweet, Demand Progress campaign director Robert Cruikshank questioned why Pelosi was allowing Republicans to dictate the terms of rule changes in the House. Forgive me for asking, but who won control of the House in the 2018 election? Cruikshank asked sarcastically. A few hours after it was revealed that the Speaker had reversed her caucus on a rule change because of objections from the minority party, Washington Post columnist E.J. Dionne published an opinion piece claiming that from now on Pelosi is playing hardball. What? What? She plays hardball, all right. She plays hardball with all the Democrats. But she never plays hardball with the Republicans. Why do you suppose that is? Because she is a Republican. For journalist Jeff Spross, the sentiment at this time, after capitulating on the rule change and Democratic priorities in corona relief virus bills Pelosi would fight, was one that just didn't pass muster. I mean, I hope so, said Spross, but I'm not holding my breath. For the record, neither am I holding my breath. Okay, so now, after all that, we get to Biden. What's the latest news on Smokey Joe? I always called him Smokey Joe. Trump calls him Sleepy Joe. For once, Trump may be closer to the truth. Sleepy Joe is probably right. So here we go. Sharing that screen. This is from Bloomberg, and thanks to Steve Gonzo, who sent this to me shortly before it was time to live stream tonight. And this is an article from the Bloomberg Opinion. It's written by Jennifer Epstein, who I don't think is any relation to our Jeff Epstein, or to the notorious Jeff Epstein, for that matter, who is an entirely different person. And the title is Larry Summers Advising Biden Campaign on Economic Recovery. And this is just awful. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers is advising Joe Biden's presidential campaign on economic policy, including its plans to revive the U.S. economy after the coronavirus pandemic, according to 5 people familiar with his involvement. The Obama and Clinton administration veterans' role would likely roil progressives. You bet it roils me, who view his past work on the 2009 recovery as too favorable to big banks. That's awkward for the Biden campaign at a time when it is trying to win the trust of former supporters of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. So why is Larry Summers advising Joe Biden? Well, Joe Biden thinks it's to help him. But I think the real purpose of his advising Joe Biden is to turn the progressives entirely away from Joe Biden so he won't get a single vote from the progressives. And, of course, that will cause Joe Biden to lose and Trump to win. So I think Larry Summers wants Trump to win. That must be his motive, because that's the only reason I can think of why he would show his face around the Biden White House. Summers was the first name, according to the article, on the, quote, Biden do not reappoint list, unquote, published last month by the American Prospect's Robert Kuttner, who wrote that Summers in 2009, quote, not only lowballed the necessary economic stimulus and ended it prematurely. Yes, he was the one. I won't say only he was responsible. Obama was responsible too, but he was partly responsible for the lowballing of the stimulus at $800 billion over 2 years, rather than having the stimulus that was recommended by, I'll think of her name. But anyway, she recommended a stimulus. The first name is Christine, if I recall correctly. I'm still trying to get the last name. Not only, she recommended a stimulus of $1.8 trillion, because she knew that would end the Depression quickly. And she was right. Summers didn't go to Obama with that suggestion even to voice it, because Obama had said to him he had to try to keep it within range of $1 trillion. So he played footsie with Obama instead of giving him the benefit, okay, of the opinion that he really needed, was that one of his one of the members of the Economics Council that he had appointed himself thought that the amount of the stimulus bill should have been $1.8 trillion. Obama should have at least had the benefit of that information to have considered it. Anyway, to go on. But he successfully fought for rescuing the big banks rather than taking them into temporary receivership. I remember that well. He was at the forefront of those who wanted to keep the pitchforks away from the big banks. Summers' involvement in Biden's campaign, however, would likely reassure Wall Street that Biden is not moving too far to the left from the centrist positions that earned him his establishment support. Yes, Summers is representing the donors. Opposition from the left kept Summers from being nominated for Federal Reserve Chairman by President Obama in September 2013, when a handful of Senate Democrats, including Warren, Sherrod Brown, John Tester, and Jeff Merkley, complained to the White House that he was too lax on financial regulation. Summers withdrew his name from consideration after weeks of debate within the White House about a possibly difficult confirmation fight. Current Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's term expires in early 2022. By the way, for my money, Powell would be much preferable as a chairperson of the Federal Reserve to Summers. At least Powell could be reasoned with, apparently. Anyway, a Biden aide, I'm not coming out for Powell. I hope you understand. I'm not coming out for Powell. I'd like to see Warren Mosler or Stephanie Kelton or Randy Wray or Jamie Galbraith, the chairperson of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve. Jamie Galbraith would probably be my number one preference for that spot. Okay, so one Biden aide speaking on condition, of anonymity, said the campaign is in touch with a very large and well-rounded group of informal advisors and looks forward to engaging with progressive leaders. That's going to be on Bernie's wonderful task forces that he got. That's what he got from Biden. Big deal. Summers did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Undoubtedly, Summers will be named as one of the chairpeople of the task forces, and Bernie's pick as just a backbench economist on the task force. He'll probably pick Stephanie. Biden's campaign has confirmed the names of Stephanie Kelton, that is, names of just a few of the dozens of economists who are advising him, including two of Biden's former White House chief economists, Jared Bernstein and Ben Harris. And, of course, I've been talking about Jared Bernstein, very likely to be one of Biden's top economists and likely the chairperson of the National Economics Council. In other words, in the White House, the chief economic advisor for Biden will likely be Jared. And also mentioned is Heather Bushey, president and CEO of the Washington Center for Equitable Growth, generally considered a progressive. I wouldn't call Jared, a progressive. I would call him slightly center-left, somewhat knowledgeable about MMT economics, friendly with Stephanie, probably influential by Stephanie, but I don't think he really knows much MMT. If elected, Biden will face a severely battered economy with unemployment now nearly twice as high as it reached in 2009 because of pandemic-related lockdowns. Summers was director of Obama's National Economics Council in 2009 and 2010 and played a key role in that administration's response to the financial crisis, making him a familiar presence to Biden, who helped to lead that response. So Biden worked closely with Summers. A former president of Harvard University and still a tenured professor there, Summers works as a commentator on Bloomberg Television and its Wall Street Week program. And he wrote a paper in 2019 proposing a pragmatic approach, quote unquote, to raising $4 trillion in federal revenue from the rich through higher capital gains taxes, the closure of loopholes, and greater Internal Revenue Service oversight of tax returns. That's $4 trillion over 10 years. That's only $400 billion per year. In other words, Biden has already proposed some of the ideas. Yeah, they were Biden's weak tea. And there's an article there called Read More. Summers wants to target the rich, but not through a wealth tax. Summers was critical of Sanders' and Warren's wealth tax during Democratic primary, has specifically called out the work of two economists, Emmanuel Saez and Gabriel Zuckman, who advised the two former candidates on those plans. And he said, in a typical Hillary-like pronouncement, quote, for progressives to invest their energy in a proposal that the Supreme Court has better than a 50% chance of declaring unconstitutional, that has very little chance of passing through the Congress, whose revenue potential is extraordinarily endowed for that to be the defining element in the progressive agenda in the United States, seems to me to potentially sacrifice an immense opportunity, unquote. He said at a Peterson Institute for International Economics panel in October. So that was his pronouncement, but thank you. I don't think we progressives need any advice from Larry Summers about what kind of agenda we ought to have going forward. Progressives are also critical of his role in the Clinton administration push to deregulate the financial services industry. He also faces skepticism from some outside economists for comments he made, from outside economics, for comments he made 15 years ago while serving as Harvard's president on women in science, and engineering. He said that the minds he said that women could not think as well as men when it came to math and science and engineering. He was extremely insulting to women, had absolutely no evidence to back him up. He was full of crap, as he is on many, many, many things. So Joe Biden then is still talking to Larry Summers and still receiving and embracing, evidently, very bad advice from Larry Summers. Another slap in the face to the progressives and to Bernie Sanders. Okay, so here we go. There's a very long article which I will not have time to go through here, but it's a very good one. It's by Jeremy Scahill of The Intercept. It was written on April 20th, and I just got to it tonight. And it's called The Moral and Strategic Calculus of Voting for Joe Biden to Defeat Trump or Not. And he outlines many of the considerations that we would all think of. He is very careful about it. He talks about not trying to browbeat people, talks about their vote is their vote. Okay, it's up to them. He talks about, of course, consequences if Trump were to win. He talks about consequences if Biden were to win. He is not unrealistic in his description of the terrible things that Biden may do and the terrible things that Trump, is likely to do. And he's right, on both counts. So I'm not going to go over all those things. He's realistic in his assessment, of Joe Biden. He goes over Biden's record fairly carefully. In fact, this is a pretty good source for those who want to get a point-by-point condemnation of Joe Biden's record, including the very recent allegations of rape, evidently now coming from a number of women, not simply Tara Reid, but also some other women, as well, whoever have not gone completely public yet. So just a sample of that. He says, Biden has an abominable public policy record on a wide range of issues. He has a penchant for lying about his role in the civil rights movement and being arrested in apartheid South Africa. He continues to lie and mislead about his support for the war in Iraq, the most consequential foreign policy decision of the post-Vietnam era. He has been accused by 8 women of misconduct, including one allegation of very serious sexual assault by his former Senate staffer, Tara Reid. Biden's cognitive health and mental acuity is, to say the least, questionable, particularly when you compare his current performance with videos from just a few years ago. And then he goes through that, and he talks about his poking voters in their chests in an aggressive manner, what he said to an immigrant rights activist to vote for Trump, called voters childish names, threatened a union worker in Detroit, but telling the man to stop objecting to Biden pointing his finger in his face unless the worker wants to, quote, go outside with me, unquote. Let's not even discuss the tale of this showdown with a rusty, razor-wielding corn pop at the pool. Trump's temperament is frightening, but Biden isn't exactly a cool head who exudes competence or confidence. Then he goes on to talk about the Hunter Biden, the Burisma, the Ukraine. He points out all of Biden's disadvantages because he's not going to be able to debate with Trump on grounds of, you have more allegations of sexual assault than I do, Donald. He says that's not a good line. And he says, your sons have profited off the presidency more than my son did off my presidency. He's also not a winning zinger, says Scahill. And okay, he goes through more, but let's get to the end of this now, so we can go on to the other business we have tonight. It's a very lengthy article. Well worth reading, though. Well worth reading. Then he says, so what should people who want Trump gone, but cannot stand Biden do? First of all, no one should be shamed for letting their conscience dictate their vote or decision to vote. He said, full disclosure, I always vote. Our system is dominated by corporate influence, big money, and the skewed rules of a default duopoly, and it actively fights to prevent third parties from receiving federal matching funds, joining debates, or gaining ballot access. There is no mandatory voting in the United States. Roughly 40% of Americans do not belong to either major political party, and people have a right to register their dissatisfaction with the entire system by not voting. In an atmosphere where tens of millions of U.S. citizens choose not to vote, shaming the minuscule number of people who vote for the Green Party is a disgrace. There are hundreds of thousands of voters whose principled belief is that breaking the two-party stranglehold on U.S. democracy is the only path to meaningful systemic change. Votes for Jill Stein or Howie Hawkins are not being taken away from corporate Democrats. Those votes belong to the people who cast them, and they have a right to vote however they choose, and the candidates they support have the right to run for office. It is also an understandable and morally principled decision to say, I believe Tara Reade was sexually assaulted by Joe Biden, and I will not vote for a rapist. It is an understandable and morally principled position to say, I will not vote for anyone who supported the war against Iraq, unquote. None of these people's votes belong to Biden or Hillary Clinton or the Democratic Party or Twitter mobs, and they are not votes for Trump. Ultimately, however, given the abomination of our two-party system, we progressive voters are forced to make not just a moral but a strategic choice with our votes. Okay, and recognizing Biden's a terrible candidate, being honest about that, but voting for him in an effort to prevent Trump from further consolidating his agenda is strategically sound. This is ultimately what the majority of Sanders voters will do, just as they did in 2016. It certainly has a better chance of improving the country and the world than enthusiastically pledging to vote for Biden while closing your ears to everything that is wrong about him and his record. And he goes on to say, basically, that people should keep on saying what they think about Joe Biden. Let's go a little further. Says a number of very good things in concluding. Let me get to the conclusion here. Okay, but then he gets to the end. He talks about the possibility of forming a new party and doing that work, but he says none of that is going to happen before November. Some Senate supporters deeply concerned by the candidacy of Biden had said he can have their vote but not their soul. For many people, that will be their particular rationale. For others, it will be a question of individual or collective morality in the face of Trump's horrors. And the leftist voters in swing states shoulder a greater moral burden than the rest of us, and many will decide to vote against Trump by pulling the lever for Biden. There are also very vocal opponents of Biden who are fed up and are flat out going to refuse to vote for him. They recognize the opposite of Trump is not Joe Biden. They want a society where free health care is a right and wars are ended, where everyone has housing and work that pays living wages, where you don't amass a mountain of debt to get an education, and one that treats immigrants and workers with dignity and defends a woman's absolute right to choose. I'm like, okay, again, I'm going to skip over some more of this, but you know the litany. It's a litany we all believe. Okay, so they say people who don't intend to vote for Biden think that as a strategic matter at this juncture, they regard supporting Biden as tantamount to telling Democrats to continue to take them for granted. I think that's exactly the way we feel. And then he ends with, if Democrats want to try to win them over, they should use the next 6 months to show them you take their concerns about 2016 seriously and map out the ways this campaign is different. Most people on the left who oppose Biden but also view Trump as the gravest danger are going to vote against Trump by voting for Biden. But those who disagree with that strategy do not support Trump. For them, he's not Trump, is not a gamble worth taking. The onus is on the Biden campaign and its supporters to make their case to every eligible voter in this country and earn their votes. No one should be taken for granted. So, Scahill is not at all telling us what to do. Okay, and not only that, he's giving us all the reasons that we need to have to carry out the campaign which I've suggested here. The campaign to make Biden's record very clearly apparent to everyone, to spread that record on social media so everybody knows about it, so Biden is not able to lie about it, so we can bring his record to the public, hopefully lower his poll ratings, and hopefully make him unacceptable to the Democrats and get them to look for other candidates that might possibly get our support. And one of those candidates, of course, is Bernie Sanders. But the reality of things is they hate Bernie Sanders. And it would be very difficult for them, for the rest of the party, to come over to Bernie Sanders. There are other alternatives, though, who might prove to be acceptable to us. I previously mentioned Jay Inslee, the governor of Washington State, and Jeff Merkley. Both have demonstrated over a long period of time that they are pretty progressive. They've not gone out on the limb with respect to running, okay, as Bernie has, to continuing to run and to put out, okay, an agenda that is as progressive, okay, as Bernie's agenda. But the fact remains that when Bernie proposes a bill in the Senate, it very often is co-sponsored by Merkley, who is there at his side, somewhere at his side, who's basically supporting Bernie. I think that Bernie would gladly support Merkley. And there's no doubt in my mind that Merkley would be a much better president and a much more acceptable person than Biden. And I feel the same about Jay Inslee, who is certainly serious about the climate emergency and who is very likely to embrace the climate emergency, okay, of Bernie Sanders. Okay, and even perhaps to make the selection of Bernie Sanders as his vice president. Either Merkley or Inslee might very well do that if Bernie wants to be the vice president. So, no, those books behind me are not just a green screen. I'm not going to say I read every one of those books, but I have read the vast majority of them. There may be a couple I have not yet gotten around to. Some of them are Bonnie's books, okay, and not mine. But they are the books that I've still been able to accumulate over years and years, okay, and years. Unfortunately, because of various situations having to do with the reduce of our residences, I've had to give away, or sell at least. You know, when you sell a book, you practically give it away. At least 3/4 of my books okay, I no longer have. And the books back there, they're all lined up in almost all the shelves. They're too deep. In other words, there are 2 layers of books. You're seeing only one of those layers of books. So anyway, let's get off that topic and back to the last point of the stream, the most important point of the stream. So Stephanie, okay, has been out there tonight, and she has been organizing a share army to help with these streams. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you for others who want to join her, okay, in the share army. She's also going to organize a general chat where we can all just exchange with each other during the day as we please to discuss subjects that are of common interest to all of us. And I will, of course, participate in that chat. Okay, but it's just going to be a chat, okay, for all of us. And I may take some topics that are popular in the chat, okay, and do them here, okay, in the stream. I'm sure, okay, that I will. Okay, now, some of us have been talking now for some time about starting a group on Facebook, the Biden Record Group. Now, we've been planning that group, okay, and we've been fortunate to now have a graphic, have a page graphic for the group, okay, and have an ID graphic. Both are from by Amber Lee Aurora Grigo, who has done some very fine graphics for us. And so we are now ready to start the Facebook group, and I want to thank Amber. And I would like to thank also the rest of you who have agreed with Amber to participate, okay, as admins in the group. I'll be forming the Facebook group after we get off here tonight. And so by tomorrow morning we'll have it to post in, and we will try to coordinate actions there. I will also start a Twitter group to do this, okay, on Twitter as well, and we can establish coordination between the Facebook group and the Twitter group, okay, as well. So that should all be very good for us, and it'll give us a chance to make the case. I don't want the group to be an oppositional group to Joe Biden in that sense, that we're forming as a group to defeat Joe Biden and to help Donald Trump. That is not our purpose in this group. Our fight in this group is with the Democratic Party and with the media for cloaking Biden's record for so long and contriving to keep it a secret from the public so they could have people continue to believe that Joe Biden is actually electable against Donald Trump. I believe strongly, and many of you believe, that he is not electable in the normal course of events or anywhere near the normal course of events. Now, I will say what I said before. I am not saying that Joe Biden cannot win against Donald Trump, because as terrible as Joe Biden is, the way that Trump is acting, and Mitch McConnell is acting, and the Republicans are acting, and the disaster they are creating in the economy, and the way Trump is handling the coronavirus crisis, these things are playing together in such a way that people may in the end feel that they would have to be insane to vote again for Donald Trump, no matter how unacceptable Joe Biden is. In other words, no matter how terrible they think Joe Biden is, they may conclude that still he can't possibly be as bad as Donald Trump. And I point out to you, it was that kind of voting that got Trump elected in 2016. Trump was not a popular candidate. I forget the approval ratings he had when he was elected, something like 40% or 41% or something like that. He got elected because people disliked Hillary Clinton even more. That was apparent. People were reasoning, Hillary Clinton is going to be terrible for me. I'm never going to get decent health insurance. I'm never going to get a good job again. I'm never going to recover from the international trade deals that have picked my pocket for a decade or more. How could Hillary Clinton be worse for me than Donald Trump? That's the way they were voting in 2016, and that is why Trump won. That is the bottom line. Actually. So now, the shoe is on the other foot. And Trump is so terrible that people may decide in the end, as bad as Biden could be, there's no way he can be worse than Donald Trump. People may end up actually believing that. And they may vote for Biden anyway, and so Biden may win. But I don't want people to have to approach the election with that kind of choice, and I don't think you do either. I think none of us want to approach the election without that kind of choice. We want to have a candidate to vote for who is at least a decent person and not a very corrupt person, and someone who wants to do something about the climate emergency, and someone who is open to Medicare for all. We can have a candidate like that. We can have the Democratic Party turn to a candidate like that, who they don't consider as objectionable to Bernie, who they don't consider as quite as big a threat to their donor games and their deal flow games, who they consider to be a moderate, and who they think will deal with them with consideration, even though they recognize that that person is more progressive than they would like. Okay. But at least we would not have Joe Biden. If we can do this, if we can make social media work for us in this way, then at least it won't be Trump against Joe Biden. And if the party thinks we can do the same thing to Kamala Harris, and we can do the same thing to Amy Klobuchar that we've done to Joe Biden, then maybe they won't be very quick to turn to those alternatives either. And the same, of course, for Pete Buttigieg, another completely unacceptable neoliberal alternative. If we do it successfully with Biden, we may be able to convince them they better not turn to another Turkey. They have to turn to somebody who we are at least at peace with, if not entirely behind the way we are with Bernie Sanders. So I think this is very important work. We may not be successful at it, but it's worth a try. It goes on until the convention. We're either successful or not successful, and then we'll be faced either with a good choice or a bad choice, come the election. But if we engage in this, we will at least have done our best to have a good choice in this election, or at least a better choice, rather than the terrible choice that we have approaching us right now at this time. So we're starting up the group, and a number of you have agreed to be admins of the Biden Record Group. And the hashtag will be hashtag the Biden Record. Okay? And we should have the group by tonight. If I can do if I can also get the Twitter group done tonight, I'll do that. But I can certainly get the Facebook group done tonight. So I want to say to Amber Lee, thank you again for your efforts. I think the graphics are really smashing. And thank you also for agreeing to be an admin of the group. And also thank the rest of you who have agreed to be admins. You'll be established as admins sometime this evening. So now I'm going to move to consider your comments. Thank you all for coming and for being here, and thank you all for sharing. So Stephanie announces she's starting the Share Army to help. Thanks again, Stephanie. And Dolores says, sharing now, that she's also starting a watch party. And Stephanie says, I'm about to go share, I'll be back. Thank you, Stephanie. Stacy says, fine, thank you. And Russ says, good evening. Kay says, Movement for a People's Party had a good live stream on FB a while ago. Great, Kay. Great, Kay. I really like the way the Movement for a People's Party is going at organizing right now. They seem to be emphasizing self-organization a lot. And that's bottom up. And I'm all about the bottom-up kind of orientation. The chat groups we're setting up here, the Facebook group, we're trying to make that as bottom-up as possible. Of course, on Facebook, you have to have an owner of the group. But I've tried to disperse it among a lot of admins so that we can share things, and so that we can foster a bottom-up kind of atmosphere to this group. If we really believe in continuous democracy, then the key to that is always bottom-up. It's always openness. And we will be as open and as transparent in these groups as we can possibly be. And Kay says, but Bernie had a love stream with 4 Democratic attorney generals tonight, too. Is that a love stream or a live stream? Or was it both? I don't think the Democrat attorney generals that we've had have been so wonderful, generally speaking. Stephanie says, don't forget about Share Army. If you're interested, please let me know. Thank you, Stephanie. And Bonnie says, who would the enromation on all those tests? I'm not sure I understand that, honey, but I think you might be asking who would collect the information on all those tests. Oh, there would be a project, and it would be run, I guess it would be run by the Center for Ethics, okay, at MIT. And so I think they would be collecting the information. And they would probably endeavor to keep the information as confidential, okay, as possible. Certainly the information on individuals. And Stephanie says, I'm on phone and iPad. I laugh out loud. Steve says, hello, everyone. Steve says, shared. Stephanie says, hey, Steve. Hi, Steve. Glad to see you. Stephanie says, hey, Kay. Bonnie says, sorry, who would gather all the testing information, jobs there at all? Yeah, there should be jobs there. There should be at least 100,000 jobs, okay, attached to that. Steve Wolfbrand said, finally out of FB jail today. Let me try to post but to a group. God, Steve, you got to avoid FB jail. Stephanie says, Steve, make sure you wait at least 5 to 10 seconds before sharing to another group. Steve said, post it to 2 good groups. Got to be careful. Can't do another 3 months. Got to be careful. You're right, Steve. Be careful. No more FB jail for you. And Mustafa Hajimar says, hi all. Hi, Mustafa. Sandy Degg. Hi, Sandy Degg. Kay says, hi, Sandy. And Steve says, hi, Mustafa. And Steve says, good advice. And Mustafa says, Steve Wolfbrandt. Hi, Steve. Sandy Degg says, hi, Kay. Russ says, lost you. Sandy Degg says, hello, everyone. Steve says, Doc and Peeps, Jimmy Dore just did the best ever interview with Chris Hedges. Watch it. Thank you, Steve. I certainly will. Kay says, I'll have to check that out. Thank you, Steve. Steve says, hi, Margarita. Well, I'm waiting for Margarita to show up. And Lana said, I read that Ruth Chris and Shake Shack gave the money back. Shake Shack has given the money back. I don't know if Ruth's Chris has given the money back. But in the case of both of them, they were operating, I think, according to the letter of the law. Their problem was in the design of the bill by the Democrats, whether, in the design of the bill by the Democrats and the Republicans. Okay, now whether it was actually deliberately done so large corporations could take advantage of the small business money or not, okay, is immaterial. Undoubtedly, the problem in design was not found because the Congress people were rushed to pass the bill. It was an 880-page bill. They didn't have the time to go over it with a fine-tooth comb. And Amber Lee says, good evening, my lovelies. Good evening, Amber. And Steve says, this is a good group. Margarita, nice people. The doc is very smart. He addresses all comments at the end of the show. And Rick Maynard says, evening all, damn busy week. Hope everyone is healthy and safe. Stacy says, I've long been having unkind thoughts about Turtle McDusherson. Who is Turtle McDusherson? So far, so good here, Richard. Kay says, Pago Pelosi. Stephanie says, I was able to share to 98 groups. Thank you, Stephanie. That's wonderful. So is there anyone willing to help share Dr. Joe's live streams in a share army? Lana Dell says, unkind thoughts about Rand Paul too. Kay says, need to venture out tomorrow to the grocery store, SMH. Not looking forward to that, but needs to be done. We ventured out, okay, on Monday. We went to Costco and we went to Trader Joe's. We wore our masks and we wore our gloves. And we were happy to say that the people at Costco were being careful. Social distancing was going on inside the store. They were being very careful how many they let in at a time. The people at the register were screened. The people who were not screened were wearing face masks, and some of the people who were screened were wearing face masks too. The place was not very crowded, and they were doing a really good job outside also to get people to keep their distance. Everybody was keeping their distance. I didn't feel that we were endangered there. I really didn't. I felt that with our preparations to protect ourselves and protect others, and with everybody else doing the same thing, that it was a relatively safe environment. But not as safe as the house, of course, but it was a reasonable risk to take for food. Then we went to Trader Joe's, and Trader Joe's is really a delight, okay, to go to for us. They were also extremely careful. They were doing everything they could to keep the danger down. People were lining up outside the store. They were social distancing. People were not let in, okay, until an equal number of people came out. Other than the workers, okay, at Trader Joe's, who all seemed to be there, there couldn't have been more than, I don't know, 30 people that we saw in the store who were shopping around. That's all. That's all. It wasn't crowded, okay, at all, because they kept it that way inside the store. They were keeping it safe. So we got everything we went out for. We were still on the lookout for toilet paper. We don't have a shortage of toilet paper, okay, as yet. But, we're looking to prepare, okay, a little for the future. We were able to get some paper towels. We had practically run out of paper towels. So that was good. We still have some tissues in small boxes. We were looking for tissues at Costco. But while last week we were able to find them, this week we were not able to find them. Stacy says, my daughter shops for me. She works at the grocery store as a pharma tech. Convenient, Stacy. And Kay says, hate this new mask to society. Hope I don't have to live this way the rest of my life. Yeah, me too. I love to see people smiling. But you get to the point where you can see people smiling through their masks. Stacy said, food stamps ought to be provided for every family in person and doubled or tripled. Too many people, okay, are unaccounted for. Yep, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think skimping on food stamps for people right now, it's just cruel and absolutely insane. Why do these Republicans get crueler and crueler every year? I mean, I think they must be reflecting their constituents in some way. Why are these people so cruel? And then they go to church on Sunday and they make like they're real Christian. I mean, that's just incredible. If anyone is concerned about that cash being contaminated, you can send it to me and I'll make it. Kay says, Ohio did up my food stamps this month. I was so surprised. I didn't believe it until I got a letter in the mail. Good for Ohio. You know, maybe Tim DeWine is not as bad as the rest of the Republicans, right? Steve says, I'll make sure it's properly incinerated. Oh, thank you, Steve. Steve says, good, Kay. And Kay says, yes, Steve, it is. And Sandy says, shared. And Lana says, 19% UGG. And Stacy says, staying at home should be characterized as having a job and then compensated as such. Yep, absolutely. Job guarantee, Stacy. Federal job guarantee and a living wage. And Kay says, laugh out loud. Schumer won't do that. Laugh out loud. That's not a laughing matter. We need to get rid of Schumer and we need to get rid of Pelosi. Shahed Buttar. Shahed Buttar. Swell Shahed's coffers as much as we can. We need him to beat Nancy Pelosi so she never darkens our door again. Kay says, exactly, Sandy. Steve says, I'm sharing to some groups slowly. Kay says, Ro Khanna was pissed. He will be on Rising tomorrow. Good, I look forward to seeing him and finding out how pissed he is. I hope he has a practical way to suggest removing Nancy Pelosi. And he doesn't just beat his gums. Sandy Degg says that's the best way. Jim Bird said pissed but still voted. Stacy says, well, L.A. has 55% unemployment, apparently. Steve says the Rising is wonderful. It is wonderful, but it's not as wonderful as this show. And the reason why it's not as wonderful, okay, as this show, okay, one reason is they don't tell you that unemployment is up to 32 million. They don't tell you the unemployment rate is up to 19%, do they? They didn't do the arithmetic. The reason the unemployment isn't higher already is because people can't get through to the offices. And Kay says, yes, Steve, I watch every day. I have to confess, I watch every day too. Sandy says, Mitch is a first-class dirtbag. Oh, he is terrible. God. Stacy Van Veen says, yeah, guillotine for nasty ass. Steve says, yeah, Stacy, I live in L.A. Today was summery warm, more traffic, many people in the parks without masks. Our numbers are low, though. I don't think we know whether this has to do with the heat yet. The reason why I say that is in Australia, their winter, of course, their summer, okay, is our winter. So when COVID was showing up, they were in the summer months. And their incidence rates, okay, have been very low, have been extremely low. Now, they've been very aggressive in testing, of course, and very aggressive in treating. So their fatality rate is also very low. They've been extremely successful in Australia, okay, and New Zealand too. But the weather has been warm in both countries. And it's still warm in Australia. They're just entering fall now. They just started fall, okay, in April. So, it's still warm there and very pleasant, especially in the major cities, okay, of Australia. So, you know, it may be too warm for COVID there at this point. They may have been getting the summer break. Who is EPI, the Economics Policy Institute? And, okay, in New Zealand as well. Very low number of deaths, okay, in New Zealand. Actually, Jacinda Ardern has done a wonderful job of getting serious about the virus, hitting it very hard, doing contact tracing, quarantining people when they come into the country. And I think they've got something like, they have about 4.5 million people there, and they've got something like, I think, only 14 fatalities thus far. It's very, very low number per million. Stacy says, talk about unemployment. No state and local funding would send that on a super on a super accelerated pace. Well, it's already on a super accelerated pace, but no state, and local funding is going to really, really, really rev that up. I mean, all the state workers are going to suddenly be on the unemployment lines when that money runs out. Carrie says, not I'm only 2 months into politics altogether, Carrie Scott said. I think the P is for progressive, as he mentioned. And Kay says, Carrie, I've been in it since the late 60s and I've only seen this country get worse. Stacy says, oh, I like this Lindsay chick. Yeah, so do I. And Carrie says, well, I won't lie, I've been living in a little bubble. I'm 50, went to a Bernie rally here in Phoenix in late February. Hey! A Bernie rally. Stacy says, Hoyer is a Republican. Hate him. Not my congressman. Jamie Raskin is. Yeah, Jamie Raskin is one of the best. He is one of the progressives that I think we can count on. He is Marcus Raskin's son, I'm pretty sure. Marcus Raskin was a very famous progressive writer. Probably still is. He must be in his 90s by now or something like that. But he was a lion of the progressive movement for years and years and years. And about the environment as well. Very early person in relation to being very hot on environmental concerns and food problems. Very important thinker. Kay says, Carrie, I lived out there for a little more than a year. Have to say not much about that area. I liked the vote by mail and no time changes, laugh out loud. Carrie said, yeah, I don't like it here at all. But all my daughters were born and raised here. I spent 3 years in Seattle, moved back a year ago due to father and uncle's health. No, I won't leave unless I can take my grandson with me. Still don't like it. Sandy says, where is Joe? Stacy says, creepy Joe, more like. You must be talking about Joe Biden, not about me. Stacy Van Veen says, Larry Summers is a misogynist pig. Just so. He is a misogynist pig. And Steve says, no Joe, sleepy Joe Biden. He's at home eating ice cream with Joe. And Kay says, Carrie, glad it wasn't just me. Laugh out loud. Way overpopulated there and air quality sucks bad. And I am a smoker. Steve says, Joe's in the basement. Yeah, Trump keeps saying Joe's in the basement. He's in his basement. He's live streaming from his basement. I am not live streaming from my basement. I'm live streaming from my combination dining room, library, jewelry center. Honey, what else is it? We've really had to scrunch down when we moved into this small apartment. So Lana says, I'm not complaining, actually. We've been getting to like it here, I think. I would like a bigger kitchen, though. That's all. Because I do most of the dinner cooking, and that kitchen is just too small. It's what? Okay, and Lana says, I also saw some headline about Biden wanting to get rid of student loans. I didn't get to read the details yet. Yeah, I think he's willing to forgive some up to a certain income level. Some percent, I think. I don't think he's willing to fully forgive the student loan debt, but he might be willing to do 10,000 to start for the coronavirus, and maybe eventually 50,000 later. And Kay says, Lana, the problem is he lies like a rug. We all know that. He lies about getting arrested in South Africa in support of Mandela. He lies about being active in the civil rights movement. He lies about what he did at the time of the Vietnam War. Russ says, Larry Summers, we'll let Stephanie Kelton be on the economic policy team. But Summers is running the show, unquote. A bait and switch. Yeah. Sandy says, and he can't find his way out. Steve says, battery died. I'm back. Sorry, Steve. Carrie says, okay, bring me to on the smoker. My oldest bought me a book by Alan Carr, Stop Smoking. I will let you, if it works, laugh out loud. I'm thankful none of my girls smoke. They all hate that I do. Well, Carrie, in 1988, Bonnie and I stopped smoking. We had to do it together, or we wouldn't be able to do it at all. One rainy day, we just decided to stop smoking. And I smoked like a chimney. The pipe smoke was often so thick in my office that people would avoid coming in to see me. They could not breathe. Anyway, we stopped. And Bonnie was, I believe, if I recall correctly, a 2-pack-a-day smoker back then as well. And we stopped cold turkey, and we haven't smoked once since that time. It's now 32 years since we smoked. And we're so glad. I think we're both convinced that if we had smoked for those 32 years, we wouldn't be alive today. Stephanie says, okay, I was making a list of groups whose admins actually approved our post and others that are happy to have us. Share the show in their group. Yep. Share the show in their group. Man, that's wonderful. Sandy says, Creeper Uncle Joe, basement dweller. Oh, come on. And lots of people have to live in basements, you know. And Rick says, backed off, snap adjustment off, taking 1 million people off snap. Christine Romer, you're right. Christine Romer, that's right. Paul Romer's wife, Christine Romer, right. A famous economist. She proposed a stimulus bill that would have totaled $1.8 trillion. That would have ended the Great Recession in 6 months' time. Instead, it lingered on until 2015. In some ways, we've never recovered from it because of Summers, because of Obama, because of the neoliberals, because of Obama's ties to Bob Rubin, who's had an undue influence on economic policy in this country since the Clinton administration, getting close to 30 years. I'm so sick and tired of those people. Rick Maynard, that was Trump. Kay says, laugh out loud. I don't want to live forever in this country alone. My late hubby died a few years ago, and he had cancer everywhere except his lungs, and he smoked Camels from the time he was a teenager. Oh, God. That was the worst thing of all to smoke, I think, Camels. My God. They were known to be the worst thing. Stephanie says, anyone wanting to join the Share Army, please leave your name on this comment. Please don't forget. And Lana says, Mike Norman says terrible things about Powell. Yeah, I haven't really, been listening to him about Powell, but I think Mike Norman wants overnight interest rates to go up. I don't think he shares the MMT position that they should be at zero all the time. I may be mistaken about that, but that's the impression I get. That Mike wants those interest rates to go higher. Anyway, correct me if I'm wrong, Lana. And Kay says, years ago when my dad had cancer, his doctor told me it's all about genetics. You either have the gene or you don't. When doctors were I'm sorry, I lost track of where I was. I'm trying to find it again. Ah, here it is. Years ago, when my dad had cancer, his doctor told me it's all about genetics. You either have the gene or you don't. When doctors were real doctors, I don't think it's as simple as that. I think a lot of it is environmental. That I think we all have a little bit of a predisposition to cancer. And the predisposition can be aggravated by environmental surroundings and stress and things like that. And especially food additives. Food additives are very important, and they're very prevalent in our food supply right now. Maybe it was true at one time that it was all about genetics when cancer first appeared, because there was very little food processing then. But right now, it's decidedly not. Decidedly not. Kay says, I'm so sorry to hear about your husband. Oh, Carrie says to Kay, I'm so sorry to hear about your husband. My oldest and her husband are talking of moving to Canada. If they can afford it, in other words, if they have enough saved, okay, or they're young enough to move to Canada, I would say move to Canada. The safety net is far, far better there. Far, far better. Anyway, she's a PA, he's a CPA. Both wanted Bernie. They're in late 20s and totally disgusted by all this. Yes, in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they'd probably all be better places. But Canada, of course, is closest to here, and the Canadians are probably most like us of any other people, so the transition is probably likely to be easier. Stacy says, pragmatic is like the call to get garlic and a silver cross. Well, pragmatic is subject to so many different interpretations. There was nothing pragmatic about the way that Obama handled his policies, okay, in his administration. It was all about ideology. It was about essentially being a neoliberal, and his calls to pragmatism were just calls to short-term convenience. They weren't about being practical, because being practical is solving problems. And one thing that Obama never did is to solve a problem. All he did in his administration was to kick the problems down the road. He failed to solve a single one of them. Sandy says, I'm going with or not, so let's not vote for terrible. Yes, let's not vote for terrible. Stacy says, in my opinion, neither Biden nor Trump are any good considering the situation we're in. Both suck and are not serious people. I completely agree. Sandy says, Joe has been a masher from the get-go, and I agree. Kay says, yes, let's vote for one rapist over another. How is that even a choice, especially for women? Well, that's what Scahill says. That's exactly what he points out. Sandy says there isn't. And Kay says, the DNC doesn't really care if they lose again. Their donors and their checkbooks stay the same either way, which is why they worked so hard to get rid of Bernie. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct, Kay. You're right on the money. And Sandy says hi, Dolores. And Steve says, Doc, did you read all those books or was it just a green screen? No, it's not a green screen. I have a green screen, but I never use a green screen. I was sometimes I was using some backgrounds when I was using XSplit, but none of it involved the green screen. And the backgrounds were never too effective because there was some kind of halo around me all the time. It didn't look well. Kay says, I like Merkley. And Steve says, I really don't care what Bernie thinks at this point. Well, I very much care about what he thinks, but not about what he thinks about Joe Biden. Stephanie says, share Army, folks, please. Steve says, just pulling your leg, Doc. And Lana says, I have a wall of books, too. And Steve Wolfbrand said, how's the share Army work? Stephanie said, please just let me know who's interested, and I'll create them. Lana says, thank you, Stephanie. And Kay says, I miss my books. When I lost my home, I sold the library of my gardening books and lost my sign, The Stand book by Stephen King, SMH. I'm a master gardener, and The Stand is my all-time favorite book. Oh, that's a shame, Kay. Steve says, I'd rather not join the U.S. Army. And Sandy says, woohoo. Lana says, yes, Kay, beautiful work by Amber. Wait a minute. Hang on a second. And let me see what I can do about that. Where's my... Okay, I'm no longer sharing, am I? No, I'm no longer sharing. Good. Okay. So let me see if I can easily show you that. Let me see if I can show you that. Okay, excuse me a moment. Hang in there a second. We'll see if I can get what I'm trying to get here. Not sure what the problem is. What I'm looking for hasn't come in yet. Ah, okay. So, okay. Okay, I hope you can see this. I think you were able to see it, right? Anyway, this is it. This is the major page graphic for the Biden record group. It highlights the young Biden, who doesn't really look so friendly. He does look like a masher from way back. And the current Biden. Okay, and there's Anita Hill. And of course, Biden's support for free trade and the TPP over the years that's been so damaging to Americans. And then the major issues, the Social Security cuts that he supported 5 times, the fact that he wrote the reform bill that ended bankruptcy for credit cards and supported the usury of the credit card companies. Then the Wall Street bailouts. He was instrumental in the Wall Street bailouts of 2008. And of course the Iraq war votes that were so important. And the terrible crime bill, okay, of the mid-90s. Many of the major elements of the Biden record are right on this graphic. So, I think you've seen it now. So, I think that is great work, and we're very grateful to Amber for it. So there we are. I think we're back. You should be able to see me again. And it is beautiful work by Amber. Oh, you couldn't see the graphic? Okay, I'm going to have to do it this way then. Bonnie says she couldn't see the graphic, so I'm going to make another attempt. It should not really be a problem for me. I don't think. Hang on just another second. I thought I'd done it right, but I guess I hadn't. Oh, I know. I know where it is. That's right here. I've been looking for it in the wrong place. So there it is. So you can see it now, I hope. Okay, so that's it. I've done a better job of sharing it now. You can see all the issues highlighted there and how everything is very, very nicely laid out. And the color scheme is great. It'll make a very attractive Facebook page, I think. So thank you, Amberly. That's great. So, here we are. You can DM me, Stephanie. Susan says, more people asking about MMT on Twitter. Well, you can mention they can follow me, Susan. Kay says, what is the FB group called? The Biden Record. It was right up there on the screen. They says you have to post to the link and then post the mission statement, purpose of the page. Okay, Stacy, I will. Stephanie says, I'll be forming the Share Army in general chat tomorrow night. I didn't sleep last night. I need it badly. So please message me and I'll get the chat groups going. I just need to know who wants to do Share Army and who just wants to be in general chat. Deborah Wilson says, hey, and Susan Eldridge says, some polls are showing they are tied in battleground states now. Yes, I know. I've been seeing those too. And Stephanie says, good night, my loves. Thank you, Joe. Great show. Good night. Thank you, Stephanie, for helping out. Have a wonderful night. Steve says, sweet dreams. Susan said Biden has a good chance of winning because Trump is doing so terribly. But if Trump were to start going left, okay, on economic policy and start pressuring the Republicans and also the Democrats that followed him, and he passed and implemented some lefty policies for people to get out of the depression or to be cushioned in the depression, suddenly I think Biden would be nowhere. Nowhere. And if Trump would just listen to his medical advisors and shut his great big mouth, I mean, Trump can still win this. Easy. Frighteningly easy how he can still win this. Stacey says, I think Biden will be worse. He will normalize the suck. Deborah says, no choice. They're both terrible candidates, no heart, over the lesser of two evils crap. They wonder why so many people didn't take the time and effort it takes to vote anymore. Doc, you got to forget about the Democratic Party. They got nothing for us. I have forgotten about them. I'm not for the Democratic Party. And Charles Cagriaden asks, are you going to be posting about the group on your page? Yes, I will be, Charles. And Steve Wolfbrand said, I will look for the new group. You'll find it advertised on my page. And Russell Goldman says, I'm going to call it a night. I need to chill out so I can sleep. Okay, Russ, sleep tight. Have a really good night. Thank you for coming. Steve Wolfbrand said, group. Karis says, thank you, Joe and Stephanie. I will share. I shared that tonight to a few groups. Thank you very much, Carrie. Kay says, yes, the People's Party is doing a great job. Lana Dell says, Sandra Lewis. And Lana says, are we going to have a conference call? Yes, we are going to set up a conference call at some point. We'll start up the group, and then we'll set up a conference call for the group. I'll probably be using free conference call for that. I have a free conference call. I've used it. It works fine, but I've never used it for a large number of people, so I don't know how it would be for the number of people in our group. And Charles Cagriaden says, what do you think about Green Party versus People's Party? Do you think it be possible for any coalition between two? Any opinion about Howie Hawkins' policy positions and worldview? Okay. I know the Movement for a People's Party people better than, I know most of the Green Party people. But I've actually had more intensive contacts with the Green Party people than I have with the People's Party, because I actually served as a policy advisor on, I forget what it was, financial policy or or bank policy, or monetary policy in 2018 for the Green Party. So I did have some interaction with some of the policy types within the Green Party. I like them fine, as people, but I've heard a lot of people say that they don't seem to be very welcoming to new people. And as a result, they don't seem ready to expand very rapidly. And the People's Party seems like it's been trying to actually organize a party for some time, but it's been disrupted by the fact, I think, that people keep going back to Bernie Sanders, because the People's Party is supporting most of the things that Bernie supported, with a few additional things which are very good. I think the platform of the People's Party, is really excellent, at this point. Do I think there'd any possibility for a coalition between the two? I think there's a possibility for a short-term coalition, between the two, supporting each other's candidates in different kinds, of districts. I don't know if I see a problem with that. Now, as to Howie Hawkins, I know a little bit about the policy positions, of Howie Hawkins. I think a lot of them are standard kinds of Green Party policy positions, and they're good, but he supports, I think, when it comes to federal funding and how it works, I think he's supporting the American Monetary Institute on ideas as opposed to the MMT approach. I don't think that's good. But I think the worst thing from Howie Hawkins that I've heard is that he believes, in Russiagate, he believes the Russians interfered in the 2016 elections in a way critical enough to defeat Hillary Clinton. And he believes there was a massive effort on their part to interfere in the elections of 2016. So I'm of the opinion that that is, from my point of view, simply nonsense. I don't think the Russians had a material effect in 2016. They spent very, very little money. I saw some of the tweets, they put out. They couldn't possibly have had a major impact. And all the people have claimed that they did really serious things, have never made that case in public. There are a lot of claims, there's this evidence, there's that evidence, this agency feels this way. All 17 intelligence agencies agree on this. That in itself was bullshit. That was something that was being said by the president, or that was being said by the director of national intelligence, who in my view, was most probably lying about that. We never got to see what each of the other intelligence agencies actually thought and the assessments, they made. Nothing's been made public or proven, in public. So I think Howie Hawkins is out of his head to credit any of that stuff. Stacy, she brings me inside on this. Turtle McDoucherson is McConnell. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I never heard that expression for him. I've heard him called the turtle before, of course, come to think of it. Steve says, take care of yourself and Bonnie, Doc. Thank you, Steve. We will, and you take care of yourself. Steve says, if you go early to Costco, they let seniors in only. I know. But I'm not sure I want to be with a bunch of seniors. After all, that may be more dangerous than with being with a cross section of the population. But the really bad thing is that they have the seniors come in from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning. And if you want to know the truth, Bonnie and I simply don't get up that early. And we only get up that early for very special occasions. And Costco is not such a special occasion. Kay says, Christian is a joke these days. It is. And Stacy says, proud infidel here. Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm a proud agnostic here. Sandy says, we need to get rid of Chuck, Nancy, Mitch, and McCarthy. Yep, I said that exactly last night. Didn't I? Probably multiple times. And Kay says, Stacy, my favorite Bible story is Jesus throwing the money changers out of the temple. Yeah, that's probably everyone's favorite Bible story. That's where we learn that Jesus had something in common with Bernie Sanders. Stacy Van Veen says, Ecuador is having a death blitz. Okay, it's having a death blitz from the conservatives, you mean? They're killing all kinds of people, or is it from the virus? Steve says, if you have any complaints about Doc's show, please write them on a $20 bill. Send them to me. I'll make sure Doc gets the message. Stacy says, our basement is pretty rad. Your bookcases are filled with LPs, over 20K of them. Yes, I have a friend, who lives here in the D.C. area, and he also has his bookcases filled with records, of all kinds. And he is often visited by another friend who lives out in he lives in Montana, and he has about 20K of LPs also that he has collected over the years. Kay says, nice, Stacy. Those were another loss for me when I lost my home. Stacy says, I think I got the plague in late December, so bad I had to quit. My bulldog quit as well. Do you think you got the plague being the coronavirus, Stacy? Steve says, sleepy sleep time. Steve says, haha, stay away from seniors. Sandy says, tomorrow we go on an egg hunt. Sandy says, we don't get up till 9 now that I'm off. Yeah, we get up even later usually. Evelina says Howie Hawkins lacks the charisma necessary. Yeah, I believe that too. He doesn't have anywhere near the charisma of Joe Stein, I don't think. Okay, folks. I know I haven't finished all the comments, and I'm grateful for all the comments. But I'm tired. Okay, it's 11:32. I've been here since 9:05. So, oh God, I think I had the coronavirus, lost my sense of taste and smell, didn't eat for a week. Wow. Well, I'm so glad that you apparently recovered from it, Stacy. You may indeed have had it. And I guess you'll know when they have enough tests, and you can take a test and see if you have the antibodies. And then you can report to them that you had it in December, that it had spread here by December. Of course, they deny that right now. He says the virus in Ecuador, people are wrapping the dead bodies in plastic. Oh, God, that's awful. Yeah, they have no defense against it down there, right? Evelina says, had Rafael Correa still been president, it would have been so different. Absolutely, it would have been different. Absolutely, it would have been different. Yeah, it's the neoliberals, you know. The neoliberals are a death cult. Anyway, good night, everybody. I will see you on Saturday. I'll be here Saturday at 9 o'clock. And by later tonight, you should have the group. Thanks.